Episode 7 of Season 2 of Arcane was jam-packed with small details and Easter eggs. Here are 69 of them that you might have missed. The first Easter egg is that the show starts with Ekko and Jinx on the vinyl. This is a deviation from the usual vinyl that we get with Jinx and Vi. This is to hint at a point that we find out later in the episode, that Vi is dead in this reality. A lot of Benzo's store has remained exactly the same. We have these gin looking masks, the candles are still there, and the clock Ekko was working on in episode 1 is also still intact. Instead of everything in the Undercity being tagged with spray paint, doodles seem to be the creative outlet in this world. Powder still seems to use doodles to make references about her life, just like she would do with spray paint in the previous universe. This book also seems to have the theoretical framework for what would become Ekko's Z drive later on in the episode. This would also imply that his alternate reality self also helped him complete the Z drive. Ekko gets torn in two in the anomaly. This is done intentionally, as he does usually have an after image following him around in game. In Arcane, a very big trope is using mirrors to show when characters have internal turmoil. Usually these mirror images would be cracked to show the internal struggle that the characters are dealing with. However, Ekko's image is intact here, which will resonate with the remainder of the episode. He's generally in a good place in this universe. Speaking about mirror images, although this is definitely powder over here, the mirror image shows Jinx, and she even has a different expression to her actual face. This is to show how Ekko sees her. I won't lie, when I noticed that the mirror image was making a different expression to powder, it creeped me out a bit. It was kind of spooky. Also, just quick side note, be sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss out when I post new videos. This item in the background of Benzo's store is a reference to Rabadon's dead cap, which is an item from League of Legends. Here's a very interesting but very small detail to notice. Powder's nails are blue here, and not the usual blue alternating with pink. It may not seem important now, but it will become progressively important as this episode continues to play out. Vander doesn't have the strap he'd usually wear around his arm where Silco cut him. This looks like the jukebox that was in the last drop, and I'm not sure who the portrait of the girl is, but she does look very similar to Jinx's voice actor, although I don't think it's her. We can see the initials STZ on the poster in the back of this shot. What I think this is a call out to someone who has worked on Arcane. And I do believe that this episode in particular is filled with references to people who actually worked on Arcane. On the wall we can see some of Jinx's doodles from Dart games that took place. This one has Milo, Clagger, Ekko and Jinx, and the other one has Vander, Silco and Benzo. And from the looks of things, Benzo won. Also, Vander's score has a skull, which could mean that he lost, but is also heavy foreshadowing for what is going to happen later on in the series.
We'll work out the kinks. I've got you.
We'll work out the kinks. Notice that just the fact that this sounded like the word Jinx was enough to send my boy Ekko off the rails. This crown that Jinx doodled looks a lot like the crowns Basquiat would draw. I'm not sure why they've taken that particular inspiration, but it does look oddly akin to a Basquiat crown. Instead of having his goggles, Clagor seems to have a monocle with a zoom lens now. Clagor asks Ekko where would he be without Powder, which is ironic because she is mostly responsible for Clagor and Milo's deaths as well as Vander's. So to Ekko, the answer to this question would be probably much better off without Powder. Vander actually asks this question again to Powder herself a bit later. This is just the writer stacking the irony of it. In this episode we learn this girl's name. Now if you don't recognize her, she's one of the most popular Jinxes, if not the leader of the Jinxes, and her name is Gert. I'd imagine that that is short for Gertrude, but we move. This specific scene is right outside the last drop. We've seen Vander walk up this path before in episode 1, and we know that it leads to Benzo's store. Heimerdinger says he's been here for 1,128 years, which could be code for the calendar date November 28th. Just remember that when the 28th comes around. He also mentions that he's been there for 6 hours 20 minutes on top of the previous time, and that could also be the exact time on November 28th that Riot wants you to pay attention to. This one is a huge reach, so take it with a grain of salt. On Powder's table, you can see the monkey that caused the catastrophe in the first season, and it's still intact. The bunny ears Isha was wearing are also there. But the toy bunny that she gets from Vi isn't there because Vi isn't alive to tell her about it. This cylinder on Jinx's shelf now does look like it's foreshadowing Ekko's Z drive. There's also a sketch of Jinx and Ekko together, bonded by a heart on Jinx's mirror. The monkey has Milo's face on it. So not much has changed from verse to verse. The painting of Powder here on the left is extremely similar in style to the one on the Firelight's mural in the alternate universe. This does somewhat imply that Ekko is the one painting all of these. We do get more proof to this later on. This doodle behind Ekko is a reference to his League of Legends appearance, where his hairstyle is a mohawk instead of the dreads he has currently. This could also be an indication that he has had a mohawk previously in this particular reality. The bird doodles on Vi's painting were probably done by Powder. The parallel here is that Jinx also does have a painting which also does use very similar birds to represent her. Given that in this instance it's used to portray Vi being dead, we can now assume that that painting with Vanda in the background and Jinx in the foreground is a death flag for both characters. This shot of the book falling is a confirmation that all of the doodles we keep seeing are all by Powder. It's somewhat the writer's way of confirming this. What's interesting is that most of her sketches are about her life and times with Ekko, whereas in the previous universe most of her graffiti and chalk drawings would be about her life and times with Vi. Ekko has ridden this bike-like contraption that drives past him here before, not in the series but in this music video for Arcane with Powder. This guy right here is a shout out to none other than Windblade Yasuo. He is Yasuo from Temu. We then get this really cool frame paying homage to the various iconic League of Legends esports teams. Just on first glance, you can see T1, JDG, Fnatic, DRX, Gen G, KT roster, and a whole lot of other teams and great rosters too. As someone who's watched Worlds every year since season 2, it was a really cool shout out to see that. In this scene, we learned that Ekko actually had the time to come back and look at Jinx after he escaped the blast. But it does make me wonder, was his leg already hurt here? Or did something else happen? Maybe when Soko's guards came, he had to escape pretty quickly, and that's what led him to spraining his leg. In this jewelry store to the left of the shot, we can see a reference to another item from League of Legends. This one would be the Tear of the Goddess. This guy getting a haircut is one of the traders from episode 1 who tried to shake down Huck over a deal. And we have our extras Avengers again. Harold, Jericho, and of course the shady guy who handles the airship shipment. I spoke more about these three in my video about Act 2, so you should go check that out if you want a little bit more perspective about who these characters are. Here we can see that there's banners put up for the Piltover Innovator contest that Ekko, Clagger, and Jinx are all entering into. The emblem for this contest is the emblem for Piltover's Academy, but this emblem also resembles the unsealed spellbook rune from League of Legends. We can finally talk about an Easter egg in this apocalyptic Jace scene that we see play out. Even though in the current timeline Mbessa is hell-bent on helping Victor succeed, her ship that we can see here on the left in this alternate reality shows that it was a terrible decision for her to do so. Ekko looks up to the Kiraman workshop, which he would have seen before when he followed Jace here. In the workshop, Jace's equations are still on the board. Victor's anomaly has completely destroyed this world that Jace inhabits, and this shot mirrors the first time we see the lanes when Vi and her gang go down into it in episode 1. In this scene we can see the tragedy that played out in this reality when they failed the job and Vi died. I presume that even though they were the ones robbing Jace, he probably got much tougher treatment from the council, since a teenager would have died in this universe and what he was doing was essentially illegal. They may have made the decision to exile him, leading to Hextech never being created in this reality. We can also tell that Marcus is also way more empathetic here, because the council probably wasn't breathing down his neck to imprison the thieves, since everything in the Kiraman workshop would have been in its original place. This is crazy, but all of these small changes and little factors lead to this entire world being a much better place. It just makes you think, doesn't it? Now this shot may not seem that important, but it looks like the Firelight's tree, and it is prospering in this universe as well. we do get some confirmation of this a bit later too. In Jace's contrasting scene, instead of prosperity, we can see how many people tried to escape the anomaly event with Victor. It was mass panic, and it was all to no avail. As we see Heimerdinger play the guitar in front of the last drop, the most important thing we can notice is that Zorn itself, you know, the Undercity, has started to improve its streets. They are doing economically better, and the place just looks better overall. Even these kids look like they've gotten a complete lifestyle enhancement compared to how the Undercity is in the previous reality. These petrified looking statues resemble Harold and this enforcer whose name we do not know. We now know that these things are Victor's creations, which were originally his cult followers. Heimerdinger helps Ekko because the last time he didn't help one of his students, it went sour. It led to conflict between them and long-term issues with what his student was trying to create. Those issues could have possibly been dealt with if Heimerdinger was more hands-on to begin with. This one isn't exactly hidden, but this mage, who we now know was Victor all along, just watches Jace suffer. He watches him instead of just helping Jace through this process by fast-tracking him and getting him to the top of the hex gate. Victor's dolls also do watch Jace, although they do not harm him or interact with him any further than this. In this time spent alone at the bottom of this crevices, Jace finally gets time to reflect on his life and his decision making. He realizes how Mel manipulated him and also how he made other mistakes in general. Instead of using firelights, the dragonfly now seems to be used to represent Ekko in this scene. The metaphor being that the firelights look better when the world around them is entrenched in darkness, whereas the dragonfly looks better in daylight. Although what I will say about the dragonfly is that it doesn't match Ekko's color, which is usually green. Speaking about that, Ekko is probably the one who gave Jinx this necklace, seeing as it is green, and like I just mentioned, that's his color.
I had this dream where things went another way.
Ekko's dream of things going the other way, as he puts it, would actually be the worst thing to happen to this version of Powder, but she doesn't know that, so she loves the painting.
Your ideas change the world. I can't shake the feeling that's who you're supposed to be.
Again, Ekko explains that in his dreams, as he puts it, Jinx's inventions
change the world.
She assumes that this is a good thing, and we all know that it's a terrible thing. Those are terrible inventions. We can see by the look in Jinx's eyes here that by showing her these magical crystals, Ekko might have doomed this reality as well. More on this a bit later. This doll of Vi is a shout out to the bunny that we spoke about earlier, the one that Powder had for most of the series, which is no longer in this verse. It might even be implied that she found this bunny at some point and she transformed it into this doll of Vi. When Ekko plugs this pipe in to power his system, it's a callback to Jinx doing the same in the arcade to escape from the enforcers. We now have a name for this specific rune. It's called the acceleration rune. This monkey falling is a callback to when Vander used it as an alarm to warn them if the enforcers were coming. But this time it doesn't land on the ground, which is cool because even in the reference scene we don't ever actually see it impacting the ground. Ekko has a hex tech mishap like Victor did with Sky, essentially killing Heimerdinger, except he can very quickly undo the damage. The message here is very simple. Tech is still a dangerous and destructive force even in this reality, but this episode does its best to keep everything light. The fact that the limit on this machine ends up being 4 seconds is a callback to his after image in game, which is also 4 seconds behind him. Heimerdinger's hair stays on Ekko after he rewinds the mishap, and this shows us a very important thing about Ekko's Z drive and how it interacts with the anomaly. When Ekko rewinds, his position does as well, but any damage done to him and any mental changes he gets are sustained. In keeping with the time motif of this episode, there is a huge clock in the background of Jace's Arcane-stricken world. It's on the hex gate. Now, the first time you watch this episode, this one is probably extremely hard to catch because we wouldn't even know what this means yet at this point. But in this scene, you can see the propeller blades from Jinx's hot air balloon lodged into the hex gate. Ekko hugging the people he loves begins when Benzo dies early on in the series. He hugs Vi like this too. Soko's eye has healed up. or at least it's not black. I assume that this means that he didn't meet the doctor, i.e. singed, or just found a better treatment as time went on. This sequence of shots was super interesting because they have the exact same sound and very similar shot composition to when the firelights raided the airship with all of the shimmer on it. Jinx ended up taking out 2 of Ekko's firelights when she made her appearance in that episode. That scene is now being flipped on its head by this one, using the same shot composition and sounds for a much more tame and less hostile appearance. Powder has pink eyeliner on. This point is only relevant due to how deeply entrenched the pink color is ingrained to her downfall, and that color specifically characterizes her as Jinx. Funny enough, her having pink eyes to begin with is somewhat Ekko's fault because of their fight on the bridge. This is a very similar view to the one that Jinx was staring at with Vi in the first episode of the series. This reinforces the whole Ekko Jinx theme for this episode again. The episode name is also called Pretend Like It's the First Time, which is what Ekko says when Jinx and Ekko kiss, but it's also reinforcing this whole message that the series could have looked like this if it was just about Jinx and Ekko. Notice that her nails are now pink too. This could be leading us to the conclusion that she is slowly transforming into Jinx in this universe too. There are suddenly a lot more dragonflies in Piltover. Judging by the fact that we keep seeing them in Ekko and Jace's scene, they do seem to have symbolic weight. Their prismatic wings do fit in quite well with the whole glitching effect that is going on with the anomaly. Jace's husk also looks like it has wings due to the framing of this shot, as Powder gets the same look that she had in her eyes the first time she saw the magical crystals in Jace's apartment. Heimerdinger activates Hextech. Jinx is being encouraged to use more of her intelligence to change the world, and she now has a Hextech partner, so to speak, in Ekko. This would lead Mbessa to Piltover very soon. I thought I should just mention this shot of Jace being mirrored by his husk holding on to the hammer, just because it's peak composition. Now this one is super small, but Powder has a green X stitched onto her jacket. This is somewhat an infusion of the X's that she uses, which are pink, and the Firelight's logo, which is green. Whenever someone travels through the anomaly, it leaves behind this butterfly-like pattern, and it's no different here with Ekko. And finally, the episode wraps up with the fact that Jinx still has the magical crystals from the apartment. She hasn't gotten rid of them, which implies that Hextech still can be created in this world, and all of the trauma that comes with it is not that far away. Alright, and that was 69 things that you might have missed in episode 7 of season 2 of Arcane. This is Lois signing off. Peace.